Greetings, dear friends. We are sincerely glad to welcome you again, and today we will talk with the esteemed Igor Mikhailovich Danilov.
Greetings.
Igor Mikhailovich, in the previous video we touched upon the topic of deep focus earthquakes. And we mentioned that this phenomenon was relatively rare, whereas nowadays, unfortunately, earthquakes are being observed more and more often at a huge depth of hundreds of kilometers. And of course, it is very difficult for modern scientists to explain what kind of process this is. Because deep focus earthquakes have not been fully studied, scientists still debate and do not understand what kind of geochemical reactions are taking place under the crust, and why such pressure suddenly accumulates in ductile rock, which can cause deep focus earthquakes. Therefore, we were asked to explain this issue in our videos as well. What is this mysterious mechanism of occurrence of deep focus earthquakes? What is that? What is the nature of deep focus earthquakes? And what is the reason for this phenomenon to occur?
Well, in fact, it is all simple. Obviously, it is difficult to judge, let's say, by external factors when you don't know what is inside, or by the information that science is able to receive today. Hence, a lot of questions arise. It is clear with the crust. Pressure is accumulating there, and a shift occurs in the crust itself.
Yes, the interaction of those very lithospheric plates.
Of course, definitely. Therefore, an earthquake occurs. That is, everything is simple and clear. Whereas the deep focus earthquakes are a bit baffling. Why? There is a really ductile medium there, which is, let's say, more fluid. And in this medium, an earthquake occurs. Well, you cannot even call it an earthquake. We already said that, in fact, it all occurs due to the instability of the core. In other words, from time to time the core, well, let's say due to certain reasons, even within our system itself, I mean our planet's system, there have been micro failures in the work of the core and the so-called countercurrent flows arose. So in order to imagine what it really is, you need to imagine how our Earth is arranged. I mean, there is the crust, and there are, let's say, more ductile types of rock. They're malleable, speaking in layman's terms, they're scorching.
The mantle, as they say, right?
Yes, they're scorching and more malleable, like a pliant, slightly melted plasticine, so to say, right? Closer to the crust, it is more solid, but like malleable plasticine, whereas deep down, closer to the center of the planet, it becomes more malleable. It becomes fluid. Next, we have the so-called core, and the core, also doesn't consist of an integral core. There is an outer core, it is, let's say, solid, but rather porous, and there is an inner core. The inner core is actually mysterious, shall we say. In fact, it is very dense. I would say it's like a fragment of a neutron star. In other words, is a very dense and massive structure with very interesting characteristics. Basically, it creates all the weather for us, in fact. As we observe nowadays, it is all happening because of this very inner core. So, when, due to a certain impact on the core that comes from the outside, it oscillates in the fluid medium, there certainly appear countercurrent flows. These countercurrent flows cause, let me explain it in a simpler way for understanding. The hydrodynamics of our planet, these countercurrent flows cause an emergence of certain cavitation whirls. As a result of this cavitation, the so-called deep focus earthquakes occur. But again, it is us who call them cavitation whirls, which immediately brings an associative example of how it may occur in the fluid medium here on the surface. Here everything is simple, friends, whereas there is enormous pressure and very high temperatures. So naturally, cavitation as such does not occur there in its usual understanding. Due to the countercurrent flow, nothing other than nuclear reactions are generated. I mean, this is actually similar to the explosion of atomic bombs, and it releases as much energy as, let's say, the equivalent of a few atomic bombs.
Wow.
That's what it is, certainly. Due to the fact that there is a liquid pliant medium around, that is, the force of the explosion does not spread in one direction, but diverges tangentially, and it is partially suppressed in this liquid medium. But since the explosive wave is reflected, naturally all the force, or the residual reflected force to put it more correctly, hits one or another lithospheric plate, thus causing its vibrations. Although deep focus earthquakes can actually be registered all over the world, with greater force in some places and with a smaller one in others, and taking into account where exactly this earthquake occurred and to where exactly this major force was reflected, that's where it is actually registered. So people say it occurred at such and such specific point. I mean, this is the way they identify the location.
If scientists already understand to a certain extent everything that relates to ordinary earthquakes occurring as a result of the interaction of lithospheric plates, that such an earthquake is somehow localized in terms of both time and a certain place, well, or at least it will be reflected along faults somewhere.
In any case, it's an enormous release of energy that has been accumulating, like in a spring, right? Or let's say we take a spring and bend it, or we take any iron, any metal, capable of cracking with a high carbon content. What happens when there is an overload? It breaks. In other words, there is a release of energy in this particular point. Everything is quite clear in this case.
Yes.
Well, there are residual aftershocks. Those are already like traces, which come from an additional discharge. When the main release has occurred, then the physics of those very deep focus earthquakes is completely different. In fact, it's a real explosion.
Our scientists have also observed that the deep focus earthquake which occurred in Argentina has already affected even the area of Yellowstone. In other words, it turns out…
This is natural. Why? Because again, it affected not only Yellowstone, but all the calderas. And it affected all the volcanoes that are in the activation stage. Why? Because an expansion takes place. As I've just said,
yes, exactly.
The explosion is expanding tangentially. It turns out that at the epicenter of the explosion, where this happened, the liquid medium diverges in various directions with even greater pressure than usual. Naturally, magma begins to rise. I mean, to Yellowstone, to other calderas, and all around. And certainly later on this results in additional earthquakes too, because all deep focus earthquakes that are powerful enough, while in those areas very powerful earthquakes occur. Whether we want that or not, they affect the lithosphere of our planet. Naturally, this causes additional shifts and additional tension. So far, these kinds of earthquakes are not that strong and not that frequent, so they can still be compensated by the very internal mechanism of our planet. Therefore, they do not have a major effect. But will they contribute? They surely will. And another thing is also interesting. Precisely because of the deep focus earthquakes, certain outbursts occur. I would say increased outbursts of the electromagnetic field. They're local.
Sort of a discharge.
Of course. This may contribute to formation of the so-called plasmoids, or formation of free plasma in our atmosphere, or that which we call ball lightning. Subsequently, we will see that there will be more and more of such lightning, and people will see it more and more often. So this is also directly linked.
If previously people thought whether the existence of such a natural phenomenon is actually a myth or not, now…
No, there has always been ball lightning. It often formed during thunderstorms. But again, in specific places where there is an enhanced electromagnetic field. Why? Because ball lightning, or the so-called plasmas that are formed, they are formed exactly where the electromagnetic field of our Earth is more enhanced. This was often associated with additional energy, the atmospheric energy that was discharged by the lightning habitual to us. So everything was interconnected in this case. While now, due to the fact that the process of instability of our core is increasing, those very deep focus earthquakes or explosions, to put it more correctly, release a huge amount of energy. And this energy naturally comes out. Whether we want it or not, it is pushed out. This results in charges and everything else. I will say this, a static charge on our crust, on our Earth, so to say, or more correctly, even on the soil of our planet, because it is already a surface charge, it will increase. Hence, there will appear more of the so-called upward lightning. If before it was an extremely rare phenomenon, now we will observe it more and more often. Friends, this is a very interesting effect when lightning strikes, not from the sky to the ground, but from the ground to the sky. This is an interesting phenomenon.
Yes, people already observe a lot of them.
But there is also an interesting kind of lightning that comes out, let's say, from the surface of our atmosphere into outer space. It discharges there, or in the upper layers of our atmosphere. This is also very impressive. But again, this is also due to the processes taking place in the depths of our planet. Everything is interconnected.
Igor Mikhailovich, optimists also believe that maybe the situation related to the climate, to the destabilization of the core, will somehow resolve and everything will stabilize by itself. The Earth will release the excessive charge and the situation will level out, stabilize. Will it stabilize by itself?
By itself?
This mechanism of ours?
We would very much want this. It would be wonderful if that happened. But unfortunately, we are observing an external impact. That is, all the processes taking place nowadays with the climate, including the increase in carbon dioxide and many other things. Although I also agree that we influence the increase in carbon dioxide as well. I mean, the anthropogenic factor actually affects the increase in carbon dioxide as well as completely different gases. This is really true. That is our vital activity. I don't mean simply us as people, but production and many other things that we have made. Let's say our cars, airplanes, it all has an impact, of course. And the most terrible thing is that we recycle a lot of materials from one type to another. This leads to contamination, which is disastrous. The anthropogenic factor also exists, but it affects the environment. That's what is scary. As a result, there is a decrease in immunity, and our planet is no longer able to fight that process, the cycle of which we have entered and what is actually happening, and we see it, that even at an early stage, quite severe cataclysms already begin. Of course, we would like it all to stabilize, resolve, and calm down. But we must understand that, let's start with simple things, that, for example, our planet is a self-organizing and self-restoring mechanism. Our planet has a unique structure. This is really so. The crust itself is solid. Then there is the liquid magma and the core. Thus, it is also synchronized. It's a closed system that is actually able to work, and it has been working for billions of years. It would be good to have such a car that would not break.
Of course.
Just consider, there is no perpetual motion machine, and there cannot be one. Everything wears out. But
at least for billions of years.
For billions of years, yes, it works. And basically, in a similar way, all planets work in any star systems, everywhere. This is a single mechanism which is arranged. Yes, there are gas planets, there are others. It's a little bit different there, but the principle is somewhat very similar, let's say. As for our planet, as well as others similar to it, there is a huge margin of safety. Let's look at how many nuclear explosions were carried out. Everything was dampened, that is suppressed by our planet.
Yes, exactly.
And that did not have any consequences. There were so many earthquakes,
yes,
plate fractures, their migration and all that. But everything is living, everything has remained. So many meteorites fell on our planet.
Oh, yes.
And huge ones, yet life was preserved on it. Why? Because the planet is able to dampen it all. Even when there was an excess of magma, when calderas exploded, well, that's a terrible thing, but nevertheless, our planet was able to suppress it all and was able to recover. And life was preserved. That is, everything was really great. And our planet has even passed through far more than 100 cycles, not just dozens of them, including 24,000-year cycles. But nevertheless, It remained and life was preserved. It's just that the environment was better and everything survived because there was a margin of safety, and the ocean played a huge role. I would say the ocean plays the leading part in the immunity of our planet. Nowadays, unfortunately, we have killed our immunity a little bit, let's put it mildly. And the problems are already all obvious, of course. Because of this, there are premature reactions when we are just entering the cycle, but it is developing rapidly and quickly. That is, we observe this external impact precisely on the work of the core itself. I mean, it is no longer stable. And over the years, this instability has only been growing, although, again, the core, this very mechanism is unique. The inner core and the outer core rotate in sync. But again, the inner core rotates slightly faster than the outer core. It is clear that it rotates a little bit faster than the crust, let's say. It might seem insignificant, but if we look at those scales and those velocities, it all balances out. The forces that arise, again, those are both centrifugal and magnetic forces along with gravitational interactions. It makes everything so balanced and so robust. Nevertheless, the external impact is very strong nowadays. And since our planet's immune system has weakened, of course this will lead to certain consequences. Why? Because it is actually fraught with serious climate change and huge discharges. Also, the instability is more pronounced, which suggests that the oscillations are going to increase. God forbid the core comes to a halt, that would be the end.
Igor Mikhailovich, in this respect, I'd like to discuss one piece of news that has agitated the whole internet community, because indeed information has been released on the internet about the Chinese scientists stating that the solid inner core of the planet has decelerated. The interpretation in the media is obviously so shocking that the core allegedly both stopped and reversed. That is, it suddenly started rotating in the opposite direction and so on and so forth. Scientists say, in general, the situation is stable, no need to panic, everything is fine, everything is wonderful, it's as usual, everything is normal. So, I would like to we have just touched upon the subject of the core, and I would like you to comment, could it really stop?
Well, as for reversing,
Could it reverse, turn around, and somehow move in the opposite direction?
let's just say, in order for the rotation to reverse, huge forces are required, which we do not observe anywhere around, that's firstly. Secondly, could the core stop? In theory, someday it will stop, let's put it this way. Can it stop? Yes, it can. The fact that it decelerates and accelerates is normal. These are natural cycles, let's say. It always happens. Even if we look at the orbit in which our Earth revolves around the Sun, our moving away or moving closer to the Sun affects the acceleration and deceleration of the rotation of the inner core. Why? Excuse me, these are very considerable forces, including the forces of gravitational interaction, as well as, again, magnetic interaction. Naturally, this affects the work of the core itself, its acceleration and deceleration. But if it stopped, we would all die instantly. Let me just explain it to our friends, to make it clear. Let's give a simple example that everyone has seen. Everyone drinks tea or coffee after all, right? If we take a glass of tea, or water, whatever, take a teaspoon and start stirring the water. And once you've stirred it fast enough, sort of a vortex forms in it. But then just stop the spoon. What will you see? The first thing you will see is the water rising. But what if we additionally try to make it reverse all of a sudden, right? Some people say and assert that in outer space everything turns upside down. There is an established effect that certain small objects can rotate in one direction and then in the opposite one. It is called the Janibekov effect. Well, excuse me. What applies to a screw nut in outer space absolutely does not apply to planets. There is slightly different physics in this case, but we will come to that a bit later. So if we stir water in a glass and then stop the spoon even a little bit, we will see what resistance this produces. Naturally, expansion and stopping of the water takes place. Now just imagine there is red-hot magma under tremendous pressure. These are tremendous forces, and here suddenly something stops, especially the core. Meanwhile, the core sets everything, and it's not so much friction processes that take place there as gravitational interactions along with again magnetic interactions. These processes shouldn't be discarded either because a lot of metals are in a molten state, but even though the metal is molten, magnetic interaction still occurs. Thus, as soon as the core stops, it would all expand instantly, and our Earth's crust would simply be torn apart by magma, meaning we wouldn't even notice that. If such a thing happened at least once, our planet wouldn't exist. I would say the same thing that happened to Phaeton would happen to the Earth. I mean, only fragments would remain of it.
Igor Mikhailovich, we discussed the fact that the core is affected by an external impact, and people also came up with a question.
Of course.
Okay, but why do we not observe this impact on the Earth's surface? Why do we, as modern science, not detect it
I'll put it this way.
with various devices?
People have been living for thousands of years but haven't noticed and haven't known that there are neutrinos, right? If they hadn't accidentally discovered them, no one would have known to this day. Why?
Yes.
Neutrinos exist. They produce a certain interaction. Let's say this is necessary and important. They exist and they are needed for some purpose, but do we observe them? Do you know how many neutrinos have flown through you and me right now?
Of course not.
A huge number.
Yes, sure.
You see, during the time we've been talking, during our video recording, so to say, a tremendous number of neutrinos have flown through every millimeter of our bodies and the bodies of our friends. And we haven't noticed that. But as of today, we do know that neutrinos exist,
Right.
that it's a huge flow, and there are neutrinos which are released within our planet. We already said that as soon as we began to be exposed to the external impact, a very powerful release of neutrinos started in huge quantities from the bowels of our planet. This precisely indicated that we had come under the external impact of a different, tougher and stronger kind of energy, which in turn caused certain reactions, including nuclear reactions, inside our planet, including those in our core, which actually resulted in a release of a tremendous number of those very neutrinos. In other words, this clearly indicated the process itself, and unfortunately this process is only aggravating and intensifying. Also, why do we not observe the impact? First of all, it's a new kind of energy. Really, friends, it is something that we have never encountered. We don't know how it interacts, we don't know what it interacts with, but we know for sure that it affects the core of our planet. A simple question, why does it not affect us? Why does it not affect the crust, right? Well, if something attacked us, like cosmic radiation,
Yes, exactly.
we would see the background radiation. Something would be happening.
Before it reached the core,
Yet it doesn't affect, but at the same
we
time,
would notice.
of course, but at the same time, that very energy which is coming, those particles, carry enormous energy that is capable, again, in the structure itself. Here we have to understand, indeed, friends, our planet is a very complex mechanism. It has a tremendous speed of rotation and speed of flight. All forces are taken into account here, not just the fact that the Earth revolves around the Sun. Well, let's say our planet is spinning by itself. It is rotating around the Sun, and it is also spinning within our galaxy. We are in the arm. Guys, all that. All these forces are taken into account when our planet is moving in cosmic space. Moreover, our galaxy is not only rotating, it is flying at a great speed as well, and there is also, pardon me, a factor of rotation, and all these speeds generate a huge force inside our planet. Nevertheless, the external impact, which we do not observe, severely affects the work of our planet's core and causes its destabilization. This fact has already been confirmed. It has been noticed, it is observed, and we can see that this instability increases, which in turn leads to an additional release of energy. Meanwhile, what is an additional release of energy from the core itself, or, let's say, in the depth of our planet? It is a natural conversion of energy into heat, which in turn affects scorching minerals, metals, and everything else that magma consists of. So of course the latter begins to expand, and naturally oscillations occur, and the slightest instability, heating and all that causes not only deep focus earthquakes at the depth, so to say, but this actually provokes expansion. It causes heating of the soil and affects the electromagnetic field of our Earth. The magnetic field starts changing, which in turn causes a whole cascade of processes. You know, this is really like something whole and stable just begins to collapse. That's where it all originates from. However, why do we not notice that? Let me give you a simple example for understanding. For instance, if we take a fishing net intended for catching large fish, and take a handful of millet, for example, and throw it into this net, what will we see? At the best, several grains will rebound.
They will rebound, yes.
While all the rest will fly through the net. Okay, we take a net and put a ball behind it, an ordinary ball that children play with, and we throw a handful of grain into this ball with sufficient force. What will we see?
An attack on the bowl.
Of course. And the ball will produce vibrations if we have sufficient throwing power, right? That's the answer. This is something that is happening all the time.
Igor Mikhailovich, the key question concerns the structure of this world in general. Who and why devised it so that every 12,000 or 24,000 years humanity has to suffer so much? Why was such a test invented at all? What is actually the reason for the existence of this impact with such a cycle of 12,000 and 24,000 years?
You know, if we move away from science a little bit and let's say, go back a little bit to alternative history, to those artifacts and facts that are observed and that confirm the existence of past civilizations. After all civilizations existed for 12,000 years. That is, 12,000 years is the peak of civilization development. In fact, not a civilization, but a community. And here there are two ways. Either we become a civilization, overcome it all and develop further, or there occurs such a renewal, so to say, or such an impulse of life is set. And I'm not mistaken here saying an impulse of life. Why? Because it happens everywhere and all around. And this vital impulse sort of mixes everything up. It really sets the tone, and it is really an impulse. The only question is, where does it come from and why, right? And why with such frequency? Well, I am interested in something else. This process is observable, and many people understand that. This is actually correct, and it is all logical, in fact. But how does this happen? Can it be coming from the center of our universe? It cannot. Why? Because we are turning too slowly towards the center. It means there must be quite a lot of sources of this impulse around the universe. But that's also unrealistic.
Or there is some huge macro object which would have such an impact on everyone, on all the planets.
Absolutely right. After all, every 12,000 years we get affected. And here's a pattern. Every 24,000 years we are exposed to a very tough impact. And now we have come under the external impact of another, tougher kind of energy, which means that our galaxy doesn't protect us, let's say, right? So, there is definitely a single center after all, it comes from somewhere.
And it is strange that it is destructive for some civilizations, while for others, as you've said, it is a transition to another level.
It is on the contrary creative. Of course, this is a new impulse, these are new energies. It's a jackpot for civilizations, so to say. But at the same time, it can be disastrous for civilizations like ours. And it cannot come from the center of the universe. We don't have any large objects around us, at least observable ones that would be capable of sending such powerful and strong radiation. Do you know what this suggests? There are only two options. Either we, friends, really live in a multiverse, when lots of universes revolve around some center at huge, mind-blowing speeds, which set this impulse, but we may simply not notice that. Thus, it means there may be a huge number of universes like ours, and that is actually logical. Even in ancient times, there was someone named Hermes Trismegistus who said, "As within, so without." As above, so below. That is, everything obeys the laws of fractality. And this is really the case in nature. So, based on this, there may be a multitude of our universes that are connected just like our galaxies are connected to each other, right? While in galaxies there are our solar systems or star systems and planets tied to the stars, and all these billions and billions of universes rotate at a great speed around a single center that sets this impulse. It means that every 12,000 years our entire universe has to fly around this center, so to say, right? And then not just every 24,000 years, but when there is a weak impact, every 12,000 years. We are probably protected then by the whole universe and not just our galaxy, right? But every 24,000 years we turn with the other side.
Yes, exactly.
And then there is a stronger impact on us. Can it be that way? It can. Well, we are fantasizing, friends, just fantasizing. But there is another option that is even more funny. Let's say, to put it mildly, well, at least the option that was suggested by Elon Musk, that we actually live in an illusion.
In a computer simulation.
Sure, a trivial computer simulation, and that nothing actually happens anywhere. There's no planet Earth, no galaxy, no universes, there's nothing at all. And all of us don't exist either. And do you know what is interesting? If we consider this question purely based on the concept of operation of our brain, our perception, our consciousness, both primary and secondary, and us as personalities, everything may fall into place quite well. Why? Because in fact we perceive what primary consciousness gives us. Primary consciousness perceives information coming from our organs, that is, from our vision, hearing, and everything else, as well as tactile perception. After all, in a dream, everything happens absolutely realistically. It's enough to put a person in a substituted state, let's say in hypnotic immersion, and to suggest to him that he's now running across a meadow touching pebbles. It doesn't matter what, just the very fact that he's somewhere and doing something, and he will perceive it all absolutely realistically.
Yes, exactly.
If we tell him that there is a smell of certain flowers, he will see these flowers, he will touch them, and if there are roses, he will prick on their thorns and he will bleed. We will not see that. He will be sitting on a chair. For us, he is here in this place. But where is he at this time in actual fact? In his illusion. Isn't it real after all? It is real. Another interesting thing is that our brain, well, not our brain, but our consciousness, so to say, perceives information, processes it, and transmits it to our personality and our brain. And here it's important, our brain, let's say, already gives a command to our body. Still, it is more correct here to say that primary consciousness gives a command, right? Well, it doesn't matter, let's not go into details and not delve into neurophysiology. Let's keep it simple. For example, we are given a suggestion that a wolf is approaching us, or a snake is creeping up on us and we see it. At this point, it doesn't matter whether a snake is really creeping up on us or a wolf is really approaching us. Or we receive a suggestion or our consciousness informs us of that. For example, secondary consciousness could play a joke on primary consciousness. In this case, the body has nothing to do with it at all. It is simply the work of consciousness. However, the response would be exactly the same in our bodies and in us as personalities. What does this indicate? That information received at the level of our primary consciousness is absolutely real for us, including our body, as if this were happening in reality. What is also important, even if we remove our body completely, I mentioned this example for a reason, the one about the dream. And a substituted state when, for example, a person may be sitting in a chair here in our studio, while we send him to walk on a meadow to pick flowers and touch thorns on roses as well. After all, The body plays no role in this case at all. It is sitting here and not touching anything.
Yes, right.
While a person experiences absolutely 100% the same sensations he experiences when running across the meadow. Can it be, let's say, a substituted state? It can. Can we be in an illusion? We can.
In a simulation, we can be.
An ordinary simulation.
Then it is programmed that every 12,000 and 24,000 years.
Just look, I'll give a simple example. Let's take our Jackie. If we had created some illusion for him, if we hadn't adapted him to our three-dimensionality, to our illusion, but had created an illusion of his own, he would have continued to exist in it. He has a self-identity. It would be enough to draw or to program his body and other bodies for him, which would work in a pattern way according to certain programs, let's say, even based on artificial intelligence. He alone would have true artificial consciousness, while everyone else would have artificial intelligence. But since his consciousness is multifunctional and consists of separate units, basically that very primary secondary consciousness and a parody of personality, so to say, he would perceive it all in the same way we perceive our three-dimensionality, with all the ensuing consequences. Yes, it's a lot of work, but if it's a self-organizing system, even if it is implemented at the level of a well-built artificial intelligence, then Jackie wouldn't see the difference. He would be living in his own illusion. You see?
Wow.
In the same way, we too can be in our illusion, somewhere, excuse me, in a box. There could be billions of us, locked up somewhere on a shelf. And someone could just be amusing himself, watching us, live our lives. Could this be the case? Easily, friends.
There has to be an observer who is interested in this.
There has to be, for sure. Why? Because all this is based on the power of real, the greatest power in this world.
What is the main function of the power of real?
To create worlds. I'll put it this way. It is the only power that converts energy into matter, meaning it turns nothing into something.
Like the double-slit experiment, when a wave becomes a particle.
Absolutely right. That's the answer for you. If we do not apply the power of real, nothing is formed. A simple example. If we observe this process, there is one characteristic of those particles, and if we do not observe it, there is another characteristic. If we put a cat there, nothing changes. If we put a dog, a cat, or a monkey, nothing happens. But if a human is observing, there is a result.
Oh, Igor Mikhailovich, this is also inspiring, in a sense that you once said the following phrase: why would we care about the Cerberus when we are people?
Of course we are people.
It means there is hope that we underestimate how tremendous the potential in us is.
We underestimate what civilization is. You see, so far, all of us are egoists. All of us are really fixated on ourselves. We exist as separate personalities and simply do not understand what a united egregore of humanity is. How beneficial and interesting this actually is for everyone, and most importantly, what prospects it opens up. And just look, we all want to live well, no matter whom we take. Really, friends, who doesn't want to have zero problems in life? Really, no problems, neither health problems, nor problems with prosperity, nor problems with one's income. Whatever you take, everything is resolved. Everything is indeed resolved.
Everyone dreams of well-being.
And this...
After all, people actually fight each other for...
Right.
Yes, to improve their well-being.
To improve their well-being. As a matter of fact, people fight each other because of the concept of authority. The only thing that will not exist is authority. People will have no power over each other, but they will eventually have power over matter. I'm not saying it should be attained right away. Let's say it is desirable to develop to the 6th level of civilization.
If we actually believe in this concept that we live in a computer simulation, then there is certainly some kind of an observer. And surely many people think that this observer is God, the spiritual world, which is new for our physics, so to say, because after all, our physics excludes this very link.
It omits it.
Yes, exactly.
But nevertheless, when we delve into physics, we begin to not only believe in it, but to know it.
Whenever you speak about the primordial Allat physics, in one way or another,
Wait.
it is always linked with
The primordial Allat physics is a 100% confirmation of not only God, but also the devil. If there is God, there is life. If there is no God, everything collapses and comes to its primordial state. It just disintegrates to the level of energies which leave where they came from. This kind of confirms the simulation which really exists.
So, by the devil, in the language of physics, we mean any matter?
This is the absence of God. It's a process of destruction.
That is,
Without God, there is only the devil. Without life, there is only death. Without light, there is only darkness. And in order for there to be life, we need a certain impetus all the time. We need this impulse of life, I would say, is like an impetus. It is that which fills with the energy of life and makes it possible to continue to exist. Matter always tends towards destruction. We are even programmed to be destroyed. And look, a question arises for some of our friends. If we build the creative society, how will we fight old age? And here a lot of questions arise regarding the fight against old age, so to say, and prolonging human life beyond the species limit. But I'll put it simply, even an ordinary piece of information that is embedded in a cell, if it is changed, the cell will live forever. Not the cell, we do not affect anything in a cell, only information. So what is being destroyed? After all, a cell is constantly dividing, it is constantly deformed. Yes, it is clear that it is currently said that there are the so-called telomeres which shorten with each division. What makes them shorten? First of all, this is due to information, and if we change the information in our DNA, merely information, nothing more, then a lot will change. Excuse me, we can change a person's skin color or anything else, both height, weight, and facial features. Whatever we want. This is already a confirmed and well-known fact as of today. I'm not saying anything new. I'm not saying that this is the know-how that will be introduced. No, friends. It already exists and it already works in our world. Just the fact that it is not available to us now, well, that's a different story. Who are we? Are we actually humans?
That is, every 12,000 years or 24,000 years, we as humanity receive an impulse of life.
Of course, like that very cell, which, if you don't update the information in it, it will age and eventually get destroyed. If we update the information in it, then it will live as long as it needs to, constantly divide and nothing will happen to it. And this very ray of light, let's say, is needed for darkness not to win. On the one hand, what is happening now that we are coming under the external impact is the impulse of life. But on the other hand, it can also be disastrous. In other words, everything that is unworthy simply disappears and ceases to exist, I would say. And in fact, if we look, we as a human community, guys, the question is serious here. It is really honest. And we ourselves should answer it honestly. Look at what predominates in each of us. What prevents us from becoming a civilization? And precisely this, that which prevents us, is the victory of Satan in our community, so to say. It doesn't matter what we call it, the animal part or anything else. But it wins. If it wins, this means we are doomed. If we as people, as our community become united, become a single organism, we create a single egregor, then we will be able to resist this as well. A simple point.
And take advantage of the impulse of life.
Of course, but then we reach another level of the game, you know, which is called human life. Even at the first level of development, as a civilization, we will discover something that even science fiction writers have not described to us. These are the opportunities we can only dream of.
It's a very inspiring piece of information that forces us to hurry even faster in order to build a creative society.
You know, it forces those who want this and who understand. But we all face the paradox of a human. That is, there are a lot of people who do not perceive this, although it is trivial. As mathematics, 1 plus 1 will be 2. The same is here. If we build a creative society, tremendous prospects open up for each and every one of us. Firstly, it means many years of happy life, even for the oldest of us now. Why? Because the human body is capable of regeneration and up to full restitution, I will say so, even under degenerative changes. This is not a problem. As of today, it's not a problem. But we don't want that, do we? We aren't doing that. But at the same time, we all want it. You see, this destructive part in us, which is aimed at destruction and self-destruction, it dominates. And if we manage to defeat it, this means we have many thousands of years of happy life ahead of us, and our civilization can take a worthy place among the worthy ones.
It can reach a qualitatively new level.
Of course, but it all depends on people, that is, on each of us. While everything starts, friends, with banal respect and love for each other. So let's just love each other. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, friends. Peace be with you.